Hello and welcome to the DrivingMaul show here on New Zealand Sports Radio. Hi, I'm Paul and I'll be your host again this evening. Sorry if you're hoping for somebody else, but hey, I'm back one more time because hey, this is kind of what I do full time, folks. So if you would like to become a supporter of New Zealand Sports Radio, check out our Patreon page, patreon.com/NZ Sport Radio, and you can become a supporter of New Zealand Sports Radio and help us bring you all this free content. Also, you get exclusive access to some special content for you. And last week, Bella, we produced for the supporters our preview of the New Zealand Rugby Awards. And yeah, we were kind of a bit hit and miss, weren't we?
Well, what can I say? So, guys and girls, before we start off this segment, I have to say 2020 has been a very indifferent year, a bit forgettable for most of us. COVID-19, pandemic, second wave, third wave, fourth wave, and so on and so forth. But something I have to say, which is unforgettable, which has come around this year, is New Zealand Sport Radio. In fact, I can remember, Paul, when we first bumped into each other at Manukau Rovers. You come to cover a game. And, this is the sort of thing which is missing in grassroots sport. It's fantastic to see, and also the engagement from all you guys out there watching and listening to us have a verbal sparring session. So thank you very much for it. So talking about New Zealand Rugby Awards.
Well, no, before we get there, I should welcome you onto the show. Welcome to the show, Bill. I was going to just very quick bounce off you to say, we were a bit hit and miss, and then we'll get into it later. But thank you so much for joining us on the show. And being a regular here on Tuesday evenings on the DrivingMaul show.
You're very welcome. It's my pleasure. As I always say, this is my highlight of the week. I absolutely look forward to it. Actually, today I was catching up with some of our workmates, and everyone was on the sauce. That's right, on the sauce. But I'm a very responsible, what do they call it? A responsible drinker. That's right. I only had a couple, so I was actually going to throw in the white towel, but I thought, no, I can't let the viewers down. I can't let Paul down. But here we are. And Simon Hughes, hi. Hope you're well. Hope you're safe, mate. Hope you're looking forward to good Christmas. So coming to the topic, very indifferent winners of the awards. Very different to what myself, Steve, and you picked last week. I have to say I'm bitterly disappointed for some of the guys who missed out. But yeah, it is what it is, and something we can pick the bones out, hopefully, today.
Yeah, we'll have a chat about that. We'll compare it to the Rugby Players Association's awards because, boy, oh boy, chalk and cheese springs to mind. We'll have a quick chat about COVID in Europe because that's been caused absolute mayhem in the Champions Cup and the Challenge Cup as well, which is... And Simon spotted that the Champions Cup was back on Sky Sport last weekend. Okay, well, that's interesting because the previous year, last season, it was on Spark Sport. This year, it wasn't on anybody's radar for round one, so we couldn't even watch it. I missed that it wasn't Sky Sport, but fantastic that it was because some cracking games in there. We'll have a chat about some women's rugby and the kind of announced, kind of not announced Pac 4 competition. And then also we'll have a look at some of the provinces and some of the open roles that are going around at the moment in provincial rugby, because there's a few around there as well. And yeah, good point by Simon here that the Jaguares have been announced that they'll be drafted into all of the teams in the new South American professional rugby competition that kicked off this year, I think, or last year. This year, I think it was. This year, that's right, for the first time. Except when you have a quick look at the list of people who were in the 15, that was going to be, what's the word I'm looking for? That played the Crusaders in that final last year. I think only 2 of them are still in Argentina. All the rest are in Japan or Europe playing rugby. So I'm not sure how many of the players are actually left to draft into those teams, but hey, it's good to know that they've got jobs somewhere playing rugby. So yeah, where should we start? Let's start with COVID then, and in the States, because as you said, it's been a strange year. I know a lot of people say how bad it's been. For me, it's been a year of opportunity, and And I think over here in New Zealand, we've been, well, people keep saying we've been very lucky. And I'm like, well, no, I'm not sure we were. I think we've handled it well as a community, and we've behaved ourselves. And hey, presto, we're in a good place. So, but yeah, Europe not in a good place at the moment. 4 games postponed over the weekend. I think a third of the Champions Cup games were, or the Heineken Champions League games were cancelled or postponed. Oh, yeah, cancelled. That's right. Bella, I mean, has rugby administration learned anything from other sports, or are they just trying to, or has money just basically gone in there and said, we have to play these games because we need the cash? Do you think?
Yeah, look, I think there's a large part of that, and also what I have to say, just building on what you said, here in New Zealand, I think we've been very diligent. We've taken some very simple, pragmatic steps, and by and large, I think most parts of the population and also the sporting population, we've been compliant with some of the guidelines, sticking to biological bubbles, following through. I can correlate to this, being part of a coaching staff and administration in a rugby club, which is in the heart of South Auckland. High risk, at risk, very high risk communities, especially Samoan, Tongan, the Polynesian communities. But again, once we put the guidelines with the staged return to play, we followed those. So I think what's actually happening in Europe is probably missing some of those steps, or some, there might be parts of the population bypassing it, and it just creeps into all parts of society, and sport seems to be one of the worst hit, because very, very unfortunate, because there were some cracking games. I was watching the Racing Harlequins game, and boy, Racing did a amazing job on the Quins. They put 49 points on the board. So it's a shame that we are missing these games. And Paul, you make a very valid point. Yeah, I think they're putting profits before people. They're taking shortcuts. All this will come out in the wash. I have some, inside info into what's actually happening and what isn't happening. And of course, it really comes down to attitude. You can't have a casual attitude, ladies and gentlemen, when there's a pandemic. We have to do the simple things. We don't need to worry about all the complicated stuff. Do the simple things, and we will get through this, as we saw in New Zealand, not once but twice. So I think all the reasonable care has to be taken, all the systems and processes where the experts. Now, for example, if you have a toothache, we go to see a dentist, right? We don't go to see the accountant. So likewise, when there's a pandemic, you have to listen to the epidemiologist and the virologist. If they say, guys, wash your hands 5 times a day, and that will make sure that this game will go ahead, then do it. It's not that hard. And you have to understand, these are professionally paid adults who have to go and do this thing. So they really have to have a look at themselves. And of course, if they are playing in an area where there's high risk, really, there's no sense in trying to pursue a game which is going to be cancelled. And all you're doing is putting more people at risk. So really, simple steps.
I think a couple of things. One, the sports, obviously there's the society piece, which we're not really a politics show, so we'll try and we won't necessarily go much more into that. But as you say, we as a whole, by our society, all listening to the rules first time, it all worked. But from a sporting point of view, you look at the sporting codes that managed to sort of handle this well. The NBA did a total lockdown bubble. Looking at NRL went pretty well in Australia, because they told players, look, that whilst society might be allowed to go to restaurants and stuff, you're not allowed to. You've got to be bubbled up. And people have said, and I put this on Twitter, that look, the cost of the NBA bubble was massive and rugby can't afford that. I agree. I'm not saying they should have done what they've done, what NBA did, but what you need to learn, what you can learn from the NBA, from the NRL, is that, and other sports as well, is that the way you make sure your sport can happen is you reduce exposure risk. Okay, it's as simple as that. Now, by taking three leagues and then mixing up the teams to play each other, making them travel more than they would have to otherwise, you're just increasing exposure risk. Playing those mixed leagues was playing the European competitions this year was the wrong thing to do, especially mid-season. If you're going to do it, play your domestic league and then play the European as a separate league at the end of the year, or the end of the season. Sorry. By doing it in mid-season, where you're taking these teams, you're shuffling them all around, and then you're sending them back again to the domestic leagues, you're asking for what's in one league to be transferred to another league, and you're just asking for more and more games to be done. So the Nocturnal Rights says, yeah, look, there's vigorous disagreement amongst virologists, epidemiologists. Yes, there is, but at the end of the day, the sports that have done well have reduced exposure risk, and that is how they've managed to mitigate. Now, you can argue about how bad COVID is, but at the moment, every league seems to be of the same opinion that if one player's got COVID, basically you're calling the game off. So let's not. So I'm not here to argue about that side of things, but yeah. So yeah, just crazy. I think Europe should be cancelled. The European competition should be cancelled, or at the very least shunted to the back of the season. But I can't see that happening because basically all the unions and all the clubs in Europe are broke. And we saw that with the Gallagher Premiership, which said, right, we're going to play every single game from last season. We're going to catch them all up. We're going to play 3 games a week. Player welfare? Yeah, goodbye. So folks, people who, if you're going to say, oh yeah, look, rugby, it's all about values, it's all about this. I'm sorry, folks, if you've looked at how the administrations have behaved, that might be on the pitch. You might have some of this stuff, the values might apply, but off the pitch, rugby has a horrible record of trying to, at the upper echelons at the very least, at trying to, or at abiding by any set of rugby values at all. So yes, it's all a bit of a farce over there, unfortunately.
Paul, the other thing I have to add is, I mean, we've now had about almost 10 months of learnings and some data, and there's some really quality data out there. Because one thing I can confirm with you is with NZR and Auckland Rugby High Performance, there's been a lot of data being shared, and I've had exposure into this. And there's some really good case studies out there, i.e. one of them being NRL, on how you prepare your high performance players, what sort of conditioning is required, what muscle groups, the technical work you do, and also off the field, the mental preparation. So there is a lot of good information, and it's actually really simple stuff. We're not talking rocket science. So I'm really amazed that some of these multi-billion dollar and euro leagues haven't really pursued some of these case studies, looked at simplifying what they're doing, i.e. sticking to their local geographic conferences, and kind of getting a little bit creative and keeping those biological bubbles limited, and being able to complete a long season, but instead trying to mix, as you said, 3 leagues together in very high risk areas. So to me, all common sense, all these values of player welfare and safety have clearly gone out the window, and it's actually being it's being replaced by mercenary like values where, look, let's play a game of rugby because we can make some money, and so on and so forth. Now, I don't want to sound like the Dracula.
It's not so much about making money. It's about it's kind of like, guys, we've overcommitted spending all this cash. We're about to go bust. If we don't play these things, we'll just go under, potentially. And yeah, it's all bad. But anyway, yes, Simon, you're quite right. A lot of this comes down to TV pressure, not only for the French teams, but also for the English teams and onwards. Nocturnal Rights is saying create big villages for the players and families and isolate them from the general population, maybe. Yeah, no. Look, I'm not saying you go to that kind of extreme, but there is definitely exposure risk, as Boa says, around that the NRL put in place, which they reduced their exposure risk and they came through it pretty clean, you've got to say. So cool. So yeah, I'm not sure much. I guess another topic we'll come back to on the COVID point of view in future episodes will be as they say in business, never waste a good crisis. And boy, oh boy, if rugby has wasted a good crisis, well, this is a prime example of how they've wasted it. So we might come back and revisit how rugby missed and wasted this crisis, wasted this opportunity for change. But we'll do that on another show. Now, Pac 4, this is something that, I'll be honest, really flew under the radar for me. And I guess this is probably actually a sign of how New Zealand rugby in particular go about announcing things. But I was listening to an interview with the head of head of USA Rugby. And he matter-of-factly mentioned, oh, yes, we've got this new Pac 4 competition coming up. And I'm like, really? Hang on, this is a new women's rugby international competition that will involve New Zealand, Australia, USA, and Canada on an annual basis has been agreed. Wow, that went very quiet. That happened with no fanfare. Not only that, but apparently they're trying to arrange it to happen in New Zealand ahead of the Women's Rugby World Cup next year, or the Rugby World Cup 2021. I mean, Bella, there's been absolute radio silence out of Australia, New Zealand around this. I don't follow Canadian news closely enough to say whether they've mentioned it, but there's been zero promotion or talk of a new international women's competition to basically rival the Women's Six Nations.
Yeah, look, I have to say, very disappointed. And until you actually mentioned about this, it's pretty much been radio silence, and it's been stone cold motherless last, stepmotherly treatment, really. And ladies and gentlemen, one thing we have, let's keep things in perspective. The sport of rugby, numbers wise, over the last couple of years, year on year, the growth factor has actually been in the women's game. That's what's actually growing the game. The numbers, last year we had about 29% year on year increase in player participation. In certain parts of the men's or the boys' game, we are having a decline. So what's actually keeping the game afloat is the women's game. So I think there needs to be far more prominence to this.
But numbers-wise, not player numbers-wise, not dollars-wise yet.
Correct. Absolutely. Player-wise. I mean, the women's game by and large is in its infancy of being professionalized. But the fact is that if the game is to sustain itself long-term, we need new participants. We need new business. That's what it comes down to. Because the economy right around rugby will then grow. Because 95% of whatever connected to it, be training gear, nutrition, transportation, game day coffee, you name it, is around the amateur grassroots game. So it's really important that we grow that part of the game. So, I guess apart from us having a little bit of a chat around this now, it's been absolute radio silence. It's been absolute internet silence. I just Googled it. Very, very disappointed. In fact, a friend of mine who is the rugby development officer in Canada, a province called Winnipeg, he said, oh yeah, by the way, there's something like this happened, but no one's really sure. And this is really worrying because we have the Women's Rugby World Cup, which is now called the Rugby World Cup in 2021 in New Zealand next year. So I don't want to say too much about this. I think there's not enough being said about it. So if anyone's listening out there with NZR, guys, you know what to do. Maybe you need to really get the public relations machine.
Well, this is it, isn't it? New Zealand rugby, at its heart, understand. This is how I see basically how New Zealand rugby acts. New Zealand rugby realizes that the All Blacks is what funds the whole organisation, and therefore they are paranoid to the extreme around handling that brand and the media around that brand, which means they never announce anything until every single I is dotted, every single T is crossed. You'll never hear you hear about games once they have got cast iron contracts in place for those games to happen. You'll never hear, oh, we are talking with. They don't do that kind of thing. They wait till it's all agreed, then they announce it. And that's what's happened here, I think, is that basically they've taken that method of communication and it applies across the whole organisation. So there was a whole bunch of discussions going on around the Mitre 10 Cup, but until they had a cast iron schedule, they didn't say anything, and they refused to say anything. It's not like, oh, we're in discussions, it'll happen at this vague time of year. No, they won't do that. They'll only do cast iron stuff. And so that's what the problem here is that they've agreed a competition, but they've not agreed any fixtures, when it will happen, where it will happen, and hence New Zealand Rugby won't talk about it until they have actual fixtures in actual locations, all organised. An example was for this year, they announced at the end of last year or early this year, they announced the Black Ferns schedule, and they said they'll have X games. Here are the games, and you counted the games, and you count how many said they were going to be, and there was one missing. So they'd announced, like, I can't remember what it was, something like 9 games, but they actually announced there'll be 9 games this year, but they actually announced 8 games. Now the reason for that was they were going to play England down in Nelson, okay, and hence that's why the Black Ferns played the New Zealand Barbarians down there instead, right? That game was all locked in. Now there were some contracts still to sign or something to be confirmed, but as far as everyone was concerned, that game was happening. But because they hadn't got the actual piece of paper with an ink signature on it, they wouldn't announce it, even though everyone knew it was going to happen. I found out someone dropped it in comment, and I went back to them and said, "Hey, by the way, you do realise this hasn't been announced yet. Would you like me to cut that out of the interview?" And they said, "Yes, please." I didn't want to get them in trouble. So those situations, and I think that's what's here. Everyone kind of vaguely, everyone in the know will know this Pac 4 is happening. They'll probably also already know where it's going to happen and vaguely which the dates are, but they're not actually going to mention it, and they're not actually going to announce it until they have actual dates. So, and I say they'll probably already have dates, but they're not locked in. Simon makes a good point here that USA and Canada are tier 1 nations. There isn't really a definition of tier 1 nations in women's rugby, but essentially the world rankings are England number 1, New Zealand number 2, Canada number 3, France number 4, Australia number 5, USA number 6. So we're talking 4 of the top 6 teams in the world in this competition. Boy, it's going to be a high caliber competition. I know a lot of people think, oh, USA and Canada, they're not very good at rugby. On the women's side, they are. So yes,
I think boy, it's going to be excellent competition. I think this will be a real eye opener for a lot of fans right across the spectrum, because in the women's game they rely a lot on skill and ability, as opposed to sheer outright power and brute force. So you actually see some wonderful plays and some interplays, and you see some very constructive and very tactical playmaking. So case in point being, Kendra Coxedge, in my opinion, I think she's probably one of the best players of the rugby union code in both male and female anywhere in the world, because there's a large degree of focus on skill. There's a large degree of manipulating situations. So it's going to be a real treat, especially to those purists. And I guess what's actually happening in the women's game is it's kind of like those Chinese whispers, isn't it? You kind of know what's happening on the other side of the rice paper thin like walls, and everyone's whispering, saying, "Hey, by the way, England's coming over. By the way, don't tell anyone. They have to stay in quarantine for a couple of weeks. They'll be training at the Takapuna." Oh, by the way, they're not. I'm just kind of making things up as I go. This is all fictitious, by the way.
Yeah.
And then everyone goes, "Oh, really? Oh, well, how come they never said this?" And then we are pleased to announce, and everything is just all formalized. So, Paul, you're spot on, mate. It's this whole ironclad, watertight. Everything has to be like so formalized, and people are starting to get a little bit sick and tired of it. Just loosen up a bit. It's okay, even if it's aren't. Yeah, that's my take on it.
Yeah, I think I think a lot of people love the All Blacks in New Zealand. I don't think they're necessarily fan. I don't think they particularly like New Zealand rugby though, and the way they go about their business. Nocturnal Right says, will they play outside of Auckland? Would be nice to have games around the country. My guess is yes, they will play outside of Auckland, right? So for example, the Women's Rugby World Cup is being held in basically Auckland and Whangarei. As I say, the All Blacks versus New Zealand All Blacks played 2 games in Auckland, or 1 in the North Shore, 1 in Auckland, and 1 down in Nelson. I'd be amazed if all these games were played in Auckland. Now, how would you schedule these games with the Women's Rugby World Cup towards the end of the year? Would you run them as double headers with the All Blacks games for the Rugby Championship? Will it be earlier than that? Will it be during Super Rugby? Would you run them as double headers with Super Rugby? Or would you run them as standalone events? That's all up in the air. Who knows, essentially. There is no one has, as I say, New Zealand Rugby hasn't even admitted this thing exists yet. So any idea as to where the games might be is pure speculation. Now, for my mind, I would give one to Tasman because, look, they missed out on that Black Ferns versus England game. They hosted a good game between the All Blacks and the Pumas, for example. If you're also looking for other venues that are non-traditional, again, I'd look perhaps down towards Napier. Might be a kind of cool place to have one as well. Also, Whangarei, you've got to put some up there as a sort of World Cup warm-up games. It's for the organisation to figure out how to run that kind of size event and to just get rid of some of those. So, for my mind, yes, those are the obvious places. At the moment, I don't think Rugby Park down in Invercargill really will have got its renovations done in time. Outside of that, Rotorua doesn't generally get very good crowds. So you could hold one in Palmerston North maybe, because obviously down in New Plymouth, the earthquake has just still means they haven't got a proper stadium down there. So I would say you're looking at Whangarei, Palmerston North, Nelson, and Napier are perhaps, to me, the places you could take these games to.
It would be a great way to showcase the country as well to the rest of the world, because chances are this whole pandemic thing is not going to go away anytime soon, especially with the travel restrictions. So I think it'd be a wonderful opportunity, and also getting new entrants into the sport, new spectators. Given that it is a women's sporting event, I think it's going to be a great opportunity, and hopefully they do take it out to the non-traditional venues. But I have to say something, Paul, very interesting. I recall sitting in a delegates meeting last year with Auckland Rugby, wanting to make a decision on where the Gallagher Shield final, if it was going to be played, where it would be played. There's a few venues brandished, and something very interesting came out in the meeting where it was stated that it's a lot. It can actually end up costing a lot more hosting at a smaller venue, because you need to get all the infrastructure around hosting a larger crowd, i.e. toilet facilities, car parking, security. So I think all these things play its due part, and I think NZR will look at the financial and economic viability. So, but some of those venues you said easily, quite clearly, they meet that criteria. So let's just hope and pray that that is the case. The game is taken. The wider the game is spread, the game is going to grow more and more, especially given that it's a women's game. And yeah, I think it's going to be a cracking competition. We got some real close, very evenly contested games in this World Cup.
Yeah, look again, like Canada versus USA. Look, they're not going to fill Eden Park. let's just be honest about it, okay, folks? You're looking at couple of thousand people. You're not going to get a big crowd for that game. So why not take it down to one of these smaller venues? You're going to get a smaller crowd, but if you get a couple of thousand into the Tauranga domain ground, or if you get a similar into Pocono, for example, you feel like you've got a full ground and you've got some atmosphere. If you put 5,000 or 6,000 into Eden Park, you have zero atmosphere. It feels dead, even if you've got a crowd that's much bigger. So yeah, absolutely. What some of those, especially for the games that don't include the Black Ferns, you can really take it to other to other venues, most definitely. Cool. Let's Rugby Awards. Let's have a look. Let's have a chat about that. So as we mentioned, we've had not only have we had the New Zealand Rugby Awards, but we've also had the New Zealand Rugby Player Awards, or the RPA Player Awards. So I'm just going to share on my screen the results of the Player Awards up there. We'll go through each one and compare them to how the New Zealand Rugby decided to do things. So First up, it's good they agreed. Sam Cane, the All Blacks captain, is the men's player of the year, and he also picked up the New Zealand Rugby All Blacks player of the year. Boa, you mentioned joining our show for our supporters, and don't forget you become a supporter over at patreon.com/NZ Sport Radio. That Sam Cane's numbers were off the charts, and whilst perhaps not appreciated by the fans, the workload he got through was immense during the international season.
Yeah, no doubt about that. I think that would have played a huge part in influencing his peers, because there's nothing better to be acknowledged and accredited and given an award in and amongst your peers. So I think there's no question that would have played a huge part. And of course, I mean, when you kind of see past all the murky stuff, and if you really cut it down to the bone, I mean, he did skipper a team which won the Bledisloe Cup yet again, and even though he had a 50% win record, won the Tri-Nation. So I think amongst the peers, it would have resonated. And of course, those numbers. I mean, his dominant, tackles, the amount of contact he took, and he played on with some significant knocks. All that would have played its part. And in the end, my gut feeling is he would have been a very easy, clear winner.
Yep. Having won it in both awards, you got to say, yeah, they agreed there, which was good. Nocturnal Rights notes that there's no Bowden Barrett amongst the nominations there. Now, look, he didn't have a particularly great season, a standout season this year in there. So Joe Moody, Richard Mwanga, Aaron Smith, and Samuel Whitelock were the other ones there. Moving over to the women's one, and this one really is interesting. As you can see, for those of you who are listening to podcasts, I'll talk through the names. So the Rugby Players Association nominated Kendra Cocktage, Pip Love, the prop, Charmaine McMenamin, Aroa Savage, and Kennedy Simon. If we look at the Black Ferns Players of the Year, was Kendra Cocktage, Kennedy Simon, and Chelsea Alley. And Chelsea Alley won it in the New Zealand Rugby Awards. She's not even nominated for the Players Awards, which was kind of interesting. And Kennedy Simon took that one. It's interesting when a player who wins one award isn't even nominated for the other one. It feels a bit wrong, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And look, with all due respect and without upsetting people too much, I have to say I'm very, very surprised not to see someone like Kendra Cocktage up there, because in this is my opinion, I hold her in such high regard. She's probably one of the best top 5 rugby players, both male and female, on planet Earth right now, purely because of her skills, ability to read the game, and how she can control and conduct the game of rugby football. So, congratulations to Kennedy. Well done. We wish you all the best. But I agree with you, Paul. It's is the word I'm looking for awkward? A bit awkward to sort of see ourselves in this situation.
It's a bit awkward. Nocturnal Rights mentions, obviously, perhaps I slipped up with my words there. Sorry, I don't know what I said. Kennedy Simon was the winner of the Women's International Player of the Award. Kendra Cocktage was at least, what's the word I'm looking for, nominated for both of the awards. So, look, you can't give her every single award. You've got to share it around a little bit. You give other people some recognition. Similar thing happened in not quite the same, in the men's one. Scott Curry, Sam Dixon, McGarvey Black, Tim Mickelson, and Regan Ware were the nominated ones. At least all 3 of the people who were nominated for the New Zealand Rugby Awards were nominated there. Scott Curry won the New Zealand Rugby one, and McGarvey Black won the Rugby Players Association one there. I'm not, and then Stacey Fuller took out both the women's sevens player and also the Blackburn sevens player. And again, at least the people who are nominated in New Zealand Rugby Awards were nominated in the Rugby Players Awards as well, with Kelly Brazier, Stacey Fuller, Sarah Hirini, Tyler Nathan Wong, and Ruby Tui the announced ones there.
Yeah, Paul, I have to say with the Players Sevens Men's Award, I think would be fair to say they got it right, bang on. Mugabe Black, I thought sensational season, fantastic player, amazing work rate, and true expect. As soon as he gets the ball, you knew something was up, and he was a go-to player. So I think all credit to all the Sevens players who voted for him, and fully deserving.
Then moving on then to the Super Rugby Player of the Year. Boy, oh boy, how different can you get? So New Zealand Rugby decided that their 4 players who will be available, who were up for Super Rugby Player of the Year were Richie Mo'unga, Patrick Tuipulotu, Geordie Barrett, and Aaron Smith. The Rugby Players Awards decided that actually none of those players were decent, should be even nominated. And they went for Lachlan Bashir, Caleb Clark, Will Jordan, Nani Lamapi, and Hoskins Satutu. How farcical is this when you've got the same, totally different players being nominated? Richie Mo'unga took out the New Zealand Rugby Awards, New Zealand Rugby ones, and the Rugby Players Award went to Lachlan Bashir. And I can really understand why Bashir got it, to be honest. But yeah, a bit it is a bit farcical.
Paul, it reminds me of an episode from The Simpsons. There's one episode where Homer Simpson has to go into the witness protection program, and there's an FBI agent coming up to him and saying, "Look, your name is John Doe." Can't quite remember what it is. Yep. And he says, "When I ask you what your name is, you will say, 'My name is,'" he goes, "Homer Simpson." So this is something like that. So John Doe, Homer Simpson. It's yeah. Look, I have to say it's confusing. I can understand why some of these players have been nominated, especially from the players' point of view, because again, they have the numbers. I look at guys like Lachlan Bashir, outstanding numbers during Super Rugby. You look at guys like Nani Laumapi before he got injured, outstanding numbers. So there is real science here, but it just kind of makes a mockery of the whole thing when you have the NZR nominating a completely different bunch of players who don't even make the cut on the other, or you look at the reverse. So awkward, a bit confusing, but once you start deciphering all that, you kind of understand. But yeah, that's more for the rugby purist, I guess.
Yeah, I think that what we've got with the Rugby Players Association one, as you say, has got who is actually really playing. What we've got for the New Zealand Rugby one is, hey, what's going to make good headlines? Unfortunately, so yes, Bashir, well done for that one. And then my 10 Cup Player of the Year, something pretty similar. Nominations were Ash Dixon, Pharaoh Fakatava, David Havili, Sione Havili, and Sayalisi Rayasi. Whereas the New Zealand Rugby ones had Caleb Trask, who didn't even get nominated, Sayalisi Rayasi, and Pharaoh Fakatava, with Fakatava winning it. Ash Dixon, his teammate, took it out for the Rugby Players Association one. Yes, absolutely. Got to say, again, happy with either of them. But I think Ash Dixon got that for a lot of his leadership, as much as play as well there. Boa.
Yeah. Look, I think we all agreed on that. And, boy, I thought Ash, purely from leadership point of view, and something I did notice in his game was he knew when to carry. He knew when to get involved in the game. And that's something, true leaders do. And, of course, he's quite inspiring for the forward pack. And I think he really lifted his team to a number of victories where if it was a different player, the outcome of the result would have been very different. So, and I have to say, those nominations, pretty bang on. I think David Havili there, Fakatava, and of course, Salesi Rayasi. And my opinion, a very deserving winner in Ash Dixon.
Yeah, Sione Havili, maybe not. I don't think I saw so much of, but then again, I'll be honest. Look, playing for Tasman, my media pass basically is for basically Bay of Plenty North, so Bay of Plenty, Waikato, counties, Auckland, Harbour, and Northern. So those are the teams I get to see more of. So perhaps I didn't see as much of Sione Havili Yeah, he'd be the only name on there that I'd go, ooh, really, and raise an eyebrow at. But hey,
I think both the Havilis, they were quite very visibly present, especially once All Blacks had gone away, especially David Havili. Sione Havili again injected himself at very crucial points, and I think that's the one pattern I have to say with the players' choice, that they actually understood what being a professional rugby player is all about and when they need to inject themselves into the game. So because if you look at the last 20 years at all levels, being NPC, Super Rugby, or Test level, you see those players who consistently understand the importance of when they have to inject themselves into the game, and those are the crucial match-winning moments.
Yep. Moving on into the women, the Pharaoh Palmer Cup Player of the Year. So on the again, this is going to be amusing. On the New Zealand rugby side, you've got Kendra Cotsage, Stacey Fuller, and Chelsea Alley. Kendra Cotsage taking that one there. Again, Chelsea Alley not even nominated as the for the Rugby Players Association one, which had Alana Bremner, Stacey Fuller, Kennedy Simon, Hazel Tubrick, and Portia Woodman, with Kennedy Simon taking it out again, like she did with the International Rugby Players Association award. Interesting. Interesting again that Chelsea Alley is in one but not in the other. Congratulations to Kennedy Simon.
Totally. What I'd like to, and what I'm saying is, I'd be very curious to see what the nomination or nominee criteria to make this list is. I'd be really interested to see what it is. I have a strong feeling it's actually got to do with some critical numbers, i.e., line bust, tackles made, work rate, etc. Kennedy, well done, 2 from 2, and congratulations. Obviously, that's a name we are going to hear more and more, hopefully, in the years to come.
Barring injury, by the looks of things. The New Zealand Rugby Association, the New Zealand Rugby Awards don't have a young player, but the Rugby Players Association one does. And these names really, when you hear them, you think, yep, I understand why. AJ Lamb, good season. Josh Lord. Actually, Josh Lord's the one I'm kind of trying to scratch my head and remember him. But Xavier Rowe, great season for Auckland. Zahn Sullivan also had a wonderful season. Xavier Rowe, great season for Waikato. Zahn Sullivan, good season for Auckland. Got the wrong way around there. And then Freedom Vayanakolo, who actually who actually won the award. Yes, you understand why those guys have been nominated.
Totally, I think Freedom Vayanakolo, very well deserved nominee and winner. And also, I have to say, my personal preference is Xavier Rowe all day. I think he was outstanding, simply and utterly outstanding, head and shoulders above probably even some of the most senior players. And of course, Zahn Sullivan, whenever he got the opportunity to impress, he's been very patient. I've got a lot of time for Zahn, wonderful player. And of course, he was given the goal-kicking duties on 3 occasions, nailed it 100%, and they were very, very high pressure kicks when Auckland needed it the most. So all in all, some great nominations there, and hopefully, as you said, Paul, barring any injuries, we are going to hear these names more and more, and there will be a huge telling and contributing factor to Auckland rugby. And hopefully, we see this men and women turn out to be wonderful rep players at the highest level.
Now, what is it about what they do down in Taranaki? Because Josh Lord, another lock. We've just had Va'ai come through and storm it all the way up into the All Black squad as a lock, also out of Taranaki. Obviously, Scott Barrett from Taranaki as well. They breed tall ones down there, don't they?
They do. It's probably something in the water, or it's probably something they eat down in Taranaki. Oh boy! It really gives special meaning to the term Taranaki hardcore, because we have some hardcore locks down there, and there's this endless churn of that production line, and it's wonderful. It's wonderful nursery for New Zealand rugby, and long may it continue, and hopefully some of the other provinces can be a little bit creative, be receptive, have their recruitment radar on, and get some decent locks, poach them, just import them into your province.
I was going to say, look, locks. I've got a funny feeling that locks are going to become some of the best played players around, because just the number of people who are that size in the population is less than pretty much any other position on the rugby pitch. Also, with basketball becoming more and more popular, the guys you want playing lock are the guys who are heading off to blast basketball as well. North Harbour is finding that to be a particular problem for them already. So yeah, if you if you're a young player coming through and you're tall enough, get into the locking department, because that's where you're going to earn some serious. That's where you can earn some serious cash in the future, I think, and where you're going to have the least competition for your for roles as well. So so there we go.
Paul, you're so correct. I think that, kids, if you're watching this, that is the New Zealand Sport Radio tip of the day. Listen to Paul Baines. If you have the physical stature and ability, be a lock, learn those skills, and you've actually opened my eyes a little bit further, purely from a coaching point of view, because there's a couple of kids coming through in some of my younger rep teams. And this is something I need to actually talk to these guys about, and actually talk to the coaches, where we look at certain skills. And, classic example is Maro Itoje, with that physicality, the ability to jump, the fitness, and other sublime skills, easily, I think, one of the best players going around in world rugby right now, if not the best.
He is going to be one of the highest paid players, definitely. So that's that's my prediction for the future is locks are where the real big money is, folks. So there we go. Let's have a look around the provinces a little bit, because I think there's some interesting positions. Actually, Simon makes a really good point. Basketball and AFL would be the position where locks would be other sports competitions for rugby. You got to say, the players that come out of AFL tend to play fullback. They don't tend to play lock, which is interesting when we've had crossover players. So yes, whilst I get what he's saying, it's interesting that actually that's not where they go and play, because the skill set, I guess, they gain in AFL. Mitre 10 Cup then, and there's a number of positions that I've seen advertised recently, which has been interesting. There's a couple of head coach positions going. So down in Taranaki, the head coach down there has resigned. I'm not quite sure what he's going to go on to next, but there's so folks, they're currently advertising. So Boa, you're a coach, and then also Bay of Plenty with Clayton McMillan moving to the Chiefs. They have an opening there as well. So yeah, a couple of head coaching positions coming up in very different circumstances. The Taranaki struggling, both not only with results on the pitch, but also financially, whereas Bay of Plenty, a much more secure union, heading in the right direction, very nearly. Actually, I'm trying to remember, did they make the playoffs or not? I think they didn't.
They did, yes.
Yeah, making the playoffs the year after they get promoted. So I mean, seriously, some big shoes to follow. Which one would you rather take on? Would you rather take on the position where you've got nothing to lose because they're already down, or Bay of Plenty, where you've got a much better crop of players, but boy oh boy, the previous coach has been doing a really good job?
Yeah, look, I have to be quite honest. Neither my goal is not to be head coach in a province. I have
no, I understand that. I was joking when I said you should, but if you were going to go for one, would you go for the good squad where they're already performing perhaps as good as they can do, or for the squad that's underperforming where you can make much more difference, but your chances of winning a championship are several years down the line? Whereas the Bay of Plenty, if you get it right, you could be on the road to a championship within a year, or if you get it wrong, it's going to be obvious you got it wrong because the other guy was getting it right.
Yeah, look, definitely I would go with the better squad, no question about it. Just the way the game's changing now, you have to go where the resources, and most important resource is your human resource, the players you have. I think it's just going to make the coach's job a lot easier. Ladies and gentlemen, coaching at the best of times can be a very lonely, dark, challenging place, especially when you're coaching at the highest level, the entry point to first class rugby, which is Mitre 10 or provincial. there's a lot of pressure. You have to perform, you have to deliver, because you're accountable for your team. So, coaching, you're going to see a lot of chopping and changing. People will lose their jobs, new people coming in. One thing I have to say, Paul, is I sincerely hope that all the unions, especially the unions playing the provincial championships, they look to recruit from within their own unions, where coaches who are involved at the premier club competition level, there is a pathway, there's a coaching progression plan where they get absorbed into these positions. And this is a wonderful opportunity for those coaches. So if I was an administrator in a province, which I am not, and this is something I have been going on and on and on, especially with my home province, is that we need a pathway for our coaches who are coaching at grassroots. It's a very, very tough job. Been there, done that. It's all heart and soul. You have to really, pour in everything you have. It's way more than just a few hours every week. So it's just reward for some of these coaches. But to answer your question, yeah, I'd definitely go with the top pick, the Bay of Plenty.
I agree with you from within. But sorry, we've got a little echo there, folks. Sorry about that. But also, I would also look at potentially the Heartland Championship, where someone has done well with the Heartland Championship province. So I would also look there as well. So yes, I agree, but to within, but also look at the Heartland Championship. I guess the question, the point here is, don't go overseas and pick up people like Vern Cotters or Gatland don't need to come back and play, come back and be head coaches in Mitre 10.
Just one quick note I have to add is, with the way things are going with recruiting coaches, by and large, one of the patterns I see is that a coach who comes on board will bring a coaching team. So you're not actually recruiting a coach, you're recruiting a coaching team. Case in point being with the All Blacks last appointment with Ian Foster. He actually brought a coaching team. And if you look at some of the people who were supposed to put their hat in the ring, or who could have, i.e. Jamie Joseph, and then we had people like Tony Brown saying, "Oh, look, I was actually very interested in coaching with Jamie because I don't have that opportunity. I'm actually not going to do that." So that's a trend you see. So I think with Bay of Plenty and Taranaki, they will probably appoint a coach, and that person will bring a team along with him or her.
I think at Super Rugby level and above, Super Rugby international level, yes, you do hire a coach, and they'll bring, if not a whole team, at least a couple of their own people. I think at Mitre 10 Cup level, when you've got a coach who's making their way through, they might not have built that team along the way. So I think it's a bit different at Mitre 10 level than it is higher up. I think they're much more willing to work with some of the incumbents who are already there. And let's be honest, provinces can't afford to pay out contracts. So if there's already a strength and conditioning coach that's on a 2-year contract, that's your strength and conditioning coach, folks. You're not bringing in your own one. So it's a bit different.
You're seeing a lot of people who are actually volunteering their time, even at the Mitre 10 level. Because the reality is, COVID's really done a number on the finances and economics. And it's a tough old place, because there are a lot of people who've actually been involved in coaching for a long time, and that's pretty much all they know. So they find it very difficult to transfer their skills into other parts of the workforce. So they stick with it. So that's a huge sacrifice. So yes, bit of give and take there. And I think just coming back to the previous point I said, where you have a progression plan for local coaches within your province, it's the perfect opportunity. But again, it's a very competitive environment.
Something points that when you talked about how it's a dark place, or it can be a lonely and dark place as a head coach, I had the privilege of I guess seeing that to a certain degree with Jeremiah, who gave a post-match interview in the semi-final, I think it was.
Beautiful speech. It was very emotional. Actually, I actually teared up. You can't see my tears because I got my glasses on all the time.
Well, I didn't broadcast this publicly because I was asked not to. I was asked to cut it at this point. But in the second half of the interview, he got very emotional and was actually crying about how friends and family had volunteered, as you say, their time for nothing. how his dad was sick as well. And you can see, it had taken its. Here was a guy who was winning. Here was a guy who was heading to the final. From the outside, it's all successful. It's all great. But he was clearly finding it extremely tough to do that. And he did say, if people appreciate what I'm doing, and mate, you've taken a losing team in Auckland to two finals, including a championship in 3 years, mate. You're very much appreciated. And I made that point. The other journalists just stayed quiet, and I couldn't do. The Milk Tunnel Right says, does Boa have eyes behind those shades? Yes, he does.
If I take them off, I start blinking uncontrollably. So the guy says there's a reason why I do this. So I have medical reasons.
It's not just him being cool wearing shades inside. So yeah. Look, it can be very lonely. It can be very tough because look, you are the person that is in charge. That everything is. You are. If you don't have, you might not be responsible for everything that happens, but you're accountable for everything that happens. You delegate stuff so other people are responsible, but at the end of the day, you're the accountable one for what happens in that squad, by all the coaches, by all the other backroom staff, by all the players, and sometimes, there aren't other people to talk to, and you do have to shoulder that. So, it can be a tough place. So there is Boa an X-Man. No, he's not an X-Man. He's not. It's not Cyclops who's going to take him off and start shooting lasers out of his eyes. That does not happen.
Paul, if I may, look, I really want to give a shout out to Alama, Philo, and Craig McGrath. Amazing bunch of people. I know firsthand the amount of planning, the amount of dedication, the amount of work they did months and months out from this campaign. And one thing I have to say is with Alama as a head coach, boy, every single time he gives his heart and soul. It reminds me of Evander Holyfield, the former boxer. Every time he got in the ring, he just gave it everything he has. And from someone observing from the outside in, it's a wonderful thing. I have nothing but respect for Alama. Much love, much respect. And what a fantastic season. So well done to you and your staff. Much respect.
Yeah, and obviously he's opened up a lot more this season in interviews and just in sort of chatting when you bump into him behind the scenes. So I thought, it looked to me like everything was in a much better and more positive place this year, but clearly it was tough as well alongside that. So lots of have really enjoyed having the opportunity to interview and chat with him after the games that I've been at. So thank you very much again for joining me, Boa, on this one. We will be back for one more show this year, next Tuesday. Folks, yes, we are going through the festive period with shows. We're not taking time off like most of New Zealand seem to do. But we will be here broadcasting to you at 8 p.m. next Tuesday. Hopefully we won't have put on too much weight from our Christmas dinners for that, but hey, perhaps that's why we have the cameras here and upwards, so you can't see quite how much we've eaten over Christmas. So have a wonderful Christmas, everybody. I wish you a safe and happy Christmas, and Boa, Merry Christmas.
Hey, look, to each and everyone who's been tuning in, listeners, thank you so much. You guys have been amazing. Have a safe, very, very Merry Christmas, and looking forward to seeing you guys back again. See you soon. Thank you.
See you soon. Yep. And don't forget, folks, you can become a supporter of New Zealand Sports Radio at patreon.com/NZ Sport Radio. And we do appreciate if you have enjoyed the show, tell your friends and share on all those lovely socials.